Greetings, I'm Solidus-Skully, and welcome back to Resident Evil Code Veronica. Basically got a few things to check here, mainly just a bit of a pish document before we get into the cutscene in hand, but yeah, this is pretty much just showing you what the facility was like before things went to hell in a handbasket. Although, one thing it is important to point out is, of course, the leader of this here faculty, well, Alfred Ashford, but yeah, we'll get to him a little bit later. This is basically just telling you about the alloy that you're going after. Again, if you remember the briefcase that exploded right at the beginning of the previous part, you should be familiar with what's going on.
Chris Redfield.
What are you doing here?
Chris Redfield. Is he a relative of yours or something?
You mean my brother?
Ah. Your siblings. Well, it seems your brother is under surveillance by Umbrella.
What? I've got to contact Leon and tell him to let my brother know he's being monitored. It's a good thing I have access to an outside connection from here.
Well, that file shows the latitude and longitude of this place. Why don't you send your brother the coordinates and ask him to come help?
Thanks, I'll do that.
Hey, I was just kidding. There's no way he could get here, even if he is your brother.
Yes, he can, I'm sure of it.
No way. He won't come. You'll just end up disappointed if you rely on others. Believe me, I know.
What was that all about?
I don't know, Claire, but that boy's got some issues. But, yeah, to kind of, well, I mean, first of all, this is pretty much one of the key facets we need to, well, progress. To talk about the puzzle first, I'll talk about Steve in a little bit. But yeah, to discuss the puzzle, since that little emblem is made of metal, we can't get it through the metal detectors, so naturally, we need to use the 3D printer and the TG01 material, which of course can pass through the scanner no problem, and therefore, Bob's your uncle, we solve the puzzle. Now, to talk about Steve Burnside in a little bit more depth than what we saw before, yeah, Steve in terms of reception is a character that I've honestly not seen too much love for. Like, I mean, in terms of Resident Evil characters, like, I mean, it's kind of hard really comparing him to some characters later in the series. Like, I mean, I wouldn't say he hits quite the level of an Ashley Graham or anything, but, well, he is divisive in the fanbase to say the least. I think it's mainly part due to writing, which again is kind of an intentional part of his character arc. The second part of which is his voice actor, Bill Houston, who, again, on top of being very noticeably Canadian with his, oh, sorry, Claire, I'm gonna do something about that. God, made him sound fucking Scottish, but, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say Steve is quite as annoying. Again, his moments don't really tend to get as bad as, well, they are in a little bit, but, yeah. You know what, I think I'll save, basically what we're dealing with in terms of Steve a little bit later on, but, yeah, the boy's got some trust issues, and, will he recover? Will he learn? Who knows? Well, we'll find out a little bit later anyway. But, yeah, if you were thinking you could just pass forward with this, no, so put away that ink ribbon and, just go on your merry way. And, of course, as is Resident Evil tradition, just when we're done with all of this sort of... Oh, no, wait, no, I was thinking about a later thing. God damn, you sneaky little game, pulling that little bait and switch. And, once again, don't forget your items, because if you do, they're not getting transferred to the item box, which, at this point we haven't even, accessed yet, which is, again, quite bizarre, but at the same time, very reminiscent of Resident Evil 1's design, which reminds me of the tangent I was talking about in the previous part, which of course brings us in to some trivia! I cannot hit the high notes! But yeah, Resident Evil Code Veronica actually began life, well, it was initially slated to be Resident Evil 3, but before that, this game pretty much began life as something of a make-up present to Sega for the cancelled Sega Saturn port of Resident Evil 2. And you might be wondering, well, how could that be, since Resident Evil 1 was ported to the Saturn, no problem, but the thing about the Sega Saturn is that, on top of basically being the PS3 of its day, programming 3D games was a bit of a challenge, on top of the fact that the Saturn itself, well, unless of course you were really into your RPGs, didn't really sell that well in the West, and as such, Resident Evil wasn't really making sales, and again, given that Resident Evil 2 was released around 1998, you know, around about the point when support for the Saturn was pretty much abandoned, and of course the Dreamcast being on the horizon, Capcom pretty much said, you know what, hey, we'll give you a bit of a make-up present for not releasing our game on your system by making Resident Evil 3 Dreamcast exclusive. And, yeah, that's pretty much how it went. Although I heard apparently, no, it wasn't Kamiya, it was, Shinji Mikami apparently caught wind of a Dreamcast exclusive Resident Evil game. He was apparently puzzled by that. For some bizarre reason, because, wasn't part of the reason why he ended up leaving Capcom was, down to the fact that, you know, Resident Evil, I think it was Resident Evil 4, yeah, was ported to PS2 when he wanted it to be GameCube exclusive? I don't know, it seems rather bizarre, like, I mean, unless he had a real hard-on for the GameCube, don't really see why he found it bizarre, but again, regardless of such, yeah, Dreamcast timed exclusive for Code Veronica, then we got Code Veronica X for the PlayStation 2, and again, I will be pointing out differences between those two versions, where it's appropriate. Well, I mean, I already did point out a little one beforehand with Steve's hairstyle, but, the differences are minor, the differences are minor, but again, noticeable when you just dissect the nitty-gritty. Jesus Christ, I'm feeling tongue-tied, 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 shooting up zombies while I'm singing. Now, I do apologize if I'm feeling in a bit of a random mood. My, drugs have started to kick in! Yeah, but on a serious note, though, it's really just sort of pattern for time, really. And again, apart from a specific side quest that is completely optional, you won't ever really have to go down this area again, although, again, it is kind of important that you do return to this area at least one more time when you have a specific item, because if you don't, well, then you're pretty much going to be screwing Chris Redfield out of the submachine guns, and that's a little bit more of an open secret, really, because, I mean, he is on the front cover of the game, and, you know, given Resident Evil's propensity for having you play as two characters with two different scenarios, well, yeah, Chris is a playable character. But again, if you want to get him the sweet weapons, well, make sure you do some shit. Which I suppose, when I discuss it, is actually a bit more of an appropriate replacement for the zapping mechanic, which was seen in Resident Evil 2. And again, like, I mean, this works far better than what it did in that game, because, well, your actions have consequences. Claire can affect the outcome of Chris's life. Yeah, but I mean, facetiousness aside, I mean, it is actually one of the few mechanics that I think actually does work rather well. Because, I mean, you can make Chris's journey harder or easier, depending on what sort of items you take, and basically what one character does affects the other, which can somewhat be seen as a bit of a criticism for first-time players, or something that, well, you know, for a more intelligent player, you'd basically have to play your cards right, but I don't know. I'll talk about that when we get to, well, the Chris part of the game, which isn't for a long while now, so in the meantime, let's keep on spelunking back and forth through the areas of the concentration camp. We no longer need the key. Discard it? I mean, unless a future Resident Evil game proves me wrong, has there ever been a game in the series that, like, ever used, like, the, oh, you discarded this key? Oh, looks like you need it again. Tee-hee, hoddle-ha. Whatever. I mean, I suppose that would be a bit of a jokey mechanic, unless you could, you know, pick the items up again, similar to what you could do in, I think it was like the 1992 Alone in the Dark game, where you could effectively drop items and pick them back up if you happen to run into them again.
Please deposit.
Whatevers. Just deposit all your items, and I'm gonna have to check up your ass, cause we're customs people. But, yeah, since the TG01, 3D printing material isn't exactly, well, metal, yeah, it can pass through no problem. And, of course, we can finally use the 3D printer, which, to be perfectly, well, again, I guess maybe it was more of the style of 3D printers that at the time, or at the very least in Resident Evil's world, but, that thing looks more like a fucking metal lathe more than it does, a 3D printer, because, well, again, I haven't really seen one in action since high school, actually, because, one of the, I think it was like one of the IT teachers I had, set one up, and it was a little bit more, well, practical, for the lack of a better phrase, but, I don't know. And bada bing, we do the thing, we got the special alloy metal. And of course, as is Resident Evil tradition, the zombies will attack, and we have no weapons. Again, ordinarily I would complain that they're pretty much doing the whole, oh, you gotta go through this area without weapons, but, gotta go through this area without weapons, but, again, like, I mean, the segment isn't really as, like, how can I put this? It isn't as obtusely laid out as what it would have been like in a, you know, that one segment of Silent Hill 2 when you have to run through the hotel without any weaponry whatsoever, so, again, I'm not really too pissed about that kind of thing. It's, it just sort of is what it is, really. Oh, by the way, make sure you do keep the lighter on hand, because, unlike most Resident Evil games, where it usually has, like, a one-function use to, like, burn a picture or just set fire to something, yeah, this item actually has a bit of a use against one of the most annoying enemies in the game, and it's, an enemy that you might not quite expect it to be useful against, but it makes sense when we finally get there. But in the meantime, we'll just cast the zombie off for daring to grab the goods. Excuse me. Hay fever. The spring months are indeed a bishop when it comes to the thing. Much like the zombie dogs? But anyway, it's time for more trivia. And that's spoilery stuff. That's something else. Oh, that's all a little bit spoilery. I guess I might as well go into the origins of Code Veronica, at least back when it was Resident Evil 3, because this game actually did have a very different premise from what you're seeing right now, because the original premise actually starred Jill Valentine on a mission to Europe, who was on the hunt for a missing Chris Redfield, and I don't know if I brought this up during the Resident Evil 3 commentary, but again, there was like a post-cutscene image with Jill finding a bloody knife, and I believe a note as well, pretty much implying that Chris was kidnapped, and again, that pretty much spurring her mission to go off and find him, and presumably taking Claire's place and exploring the Umbrella Paris laboratory. And, again, what this version of the game was gonna explore, at least in terms of its plot, was mainly the origins of the Umbrella Corporation, and, I believe it was either an early version or the progenitor virus that wasn't seen until Resident Evil 5. Which, honestly, actually would have been quite an interesting premise, but, but again, one of the reasons why they decided to change it was, well, for one thing, I think it was more to do with Sony wanting to have Resident Evil numbered titles on PlayStation hardware, so circa 1998, when, you know, Resident Evil The Last Escape was then given the Resident Evil 3 title, yeah, the Dreamcast game, which was going to be Resident Evil 3, became Code Veronica, and of course, I guess since Hideki Kamiya was reserving Leon Kennedy for Resident Evil 4, this pretty much led to the creation of Steve Burnside and Claire Redfield basically being Jill's last-minute replacement. I mean, I really don't know what to say. Like, I mean, I do like the game as we have it now, but it would have been quite interesting to have seen Jill taking the reins here. I mean, I suppose the fact that she was... I suppose it does kind of make sense with the original way things were structured, since in Resident Evil 2 there was really no evidence of Jill being around. So The Last Escape basically kind of had to ratchet an excuse of it taking place before and then after Resident Evil 2. But, all the same, though, it does kind of make sense, or at least in the way in which the game sort of tended to fling continuity around to basically fit where the series would eventually go, at least, you know, in terms of Claire searching for her brother, Leon getting into that shit with the government for Resident Evil 4's sake, and, yeah. Oh, by the way, if you position yourself correctly, you can actually knock those zombies off the ledge, which, again, you take damage, but, it's quite fun to knock zombies off the ledge, because it makes you go, whee! But again, this area right here is pretty much where we're going to be spending the bulk of our adventure, really. We don't really need to go back to the concentration camp or, you know, any part of the prison, really. At least not until the very late stages of Rockford Island. The main thing to worry about here is both the training facility that you saw before, and of course, well, the Ashford Mansion. Isn't this familiar? Wow, what a mansion! Maybe we better look for Chris. He was our old brother, you know. Stay alert! Okay, that's enough references for one day. But again, I will say, I do quite like the soundtrack to this game, man. I brought it up beforehand, but goddamn, it really knows how to set an atmosphere. And again, it's got a nice use of piano, which is just, mwah, superb! Mamma mia, it is like a spaghetti. But, yeah, it's actually around this point where you get your first exposure to the save room, and, by God, this might be my favourite save room theme in the entire series. Like, seriously, whenever I listen to this music, not only does it really, like, sell the comforts of home and safety and security against a harsh world that's trying to kill you, but it also kind of reminds me of, like a certain fantasy kind of thing, like, you know, like the fantasy hero goes back to, like, the end, and it's like, you're back! I hope you were safe in your travels. I heard that there is some danger out in the tavern. Now come, let's have a pint of mead while we discuss the Orcs' battle plans for Isengard. Come, Sparrowhawk. Warfang awaits! Mazel tov. Whatever. The point is, I really love this save room music. In fact, I'm pretty much gonna say it right here. This is my favorite save room music in the entire series. Resident Evil 3 is a close second, but goddamn, this is just fucking beautiful. I love this theme, and it's amazing. But again, the mansion segment is quite differently laid out compared to previous Resident Evil games. Obviously, the majority of Rockford Island is pretty much a, well, mansion for the lack of a better phrase, but again, a lot of the mansion is pretty much segmented off until you get plot-specific items, like, I mean, the keycard, obviously, which allows us to, well, gain access to the building, but again, as is typical of Resident Evil tradition, you gotta collect keys, you gotta get specific items, you gotta get boom, boom, boom. I really have no idea. I should really stop being so random. But yeah, this keycard will pretty much allow us to access the building. And again, to talk about Code Veronica's structure, so to speak, again, compared to other games in the series like, you know, Resident Evil 3, where you could pretty much quickly dart about Raccoon City, or Resident Evil 2, where the police station was pretty much intuitively laid out enough so you could pretty much get a good scope of the building for the majority of time that you're there, Code Veronica, on the other hand, basically takes what those games did, but expanded the scope of gameplay, I guess in the attempt to take previous formulas and, well, make it bigger, under the implication that bigger is better, but I suppose some could also see this as a bit of a criticism, in the sense that with a larger scope of environments, there's a lot more traversal and, you know, commutes to be made. And again, if you're going to be commuting across if you're going to be commuting across large expanses of, well, level terrain, there's more enemies, zombies, and BOWs for you to fight, so naturally your resources are going to be, well, running a bit thin, a lot more so than what they would have been otherwise compared to previous Resident Evil games. But I don't really see this as a negative thing, because again, as I mentioned in part 1, it really does make you consider what sort of ammo you're going to be taking, what ammo you're going to be conserving for specific encounters, and of course, you know, picking your battles and just seeing exactly how you're going to handle specific situations. I mean, I mentioned beforehand that, again, if you're really good with a knife in this game, you can pretty much have a fair bit of ammo by the game's end, but even in that case, if you know what specific ammunition to utilize, what guns you want to sacrifice, and which guns you want to use as your boss busters, well, again, you can pretty much have a majority of ammo by the end of the game, but again, that does come with a caveat that you do need to be careful, and again, you shouldn't be, well, I mean, you shouldn't just be wasteful with your ammo, because again, if you end up wasting a majority of your stockade in areas that, will screw you over, well, yeah, you're pretty much going to be fucked. And I have a very specific story to tell on that, but in the meantime, yeah, this is the secondary function of the lighter. This area is filled with bats. They are by far the most annoying enemy in the game, not counting specific boss encounters, but yeah, turn the lighter on, and the bats won't bother you. Yeah. Let's see your echolocation do something about that now, bitch. And of course we have a geranium case, but unlike the previous one, which was pretty much like a snap lock, this one requires the lockpick, which we cannot get, unless of course we go talk to Mr. Rodrigo Ravel. But again, he's not going to give us any lockpick until we get him some more medicine, so we're pretty much shit out of luck. But in the meantime, we've got more mansion to explore, and well, we're pretty much coming up to the end of the part right now anyway, so again, we don't really have much to explore because again, we need keys, we need key items, and of course we can see some earthen vases, so yeah. There's only one real specific area that we're going to be seeing in the mansion shortly after this, along with well, something that pretty much settles Code Veronica's tone in full, really, as well as providing a bit of a leitmotif for, well, the game's more operatic storytelling, for the lack of a better phrase. What that means I'll probably get to as we go on in the game, but it really does make Code Veronica a very unsettling experience, more so than pretty much any other Resident Evil game I've ever experienced. But again, you'll see it once we get to the specific room. Oh yeah, it is this room. Silly me, I thought it was going to be the silver crest. And you might be noticing a lot of artillery in this room. I might be wrong on this, but I believe the tank models in those glass cases are meant to be German Tiger tanks. I think. But again, that's talking about very specific contextual things that I'll be discussing next time. But in the meantime, let's watch a movie! That we pretty much have to watch before specific context-driven things happen. This is Alfred Ashford, the Earl of the house, and this is his twin sister Alexia. They have such wonderful pastimes like ripping the wings off dragonflies and basically watching them die sadistically in a pile of ants. Ugh, god, this cutscene really gives me the fucking heebie-jeebies, man, and as you're gonna see right towards the end of this, well, yeah, this pretty much tells you everything that you need to know about the twins. I'm Solidus-Skully, keep it new metal, and dear god, thankfully this video cuts off right at the end. Catch you dudes and dudettes next time, see you later, goodbye.